Hi everyone, hi YouTube. It's time for some economics discussion. This week I wanted to talk about why I am sort of making these videos in the first place, why I decided to start a YouTube channel, and sort of my background and motivation when it comes to this topic of wealth inequality. I started this channel after watching a YouTube video by Gary Stevenson, who is a British economist. And that video broke down how wealth inequality drives up costs of living and contributes to lowering living standards. And there was a lot of urgency behind that message, and it was something that I believed and could get behind. And one of the things that that YouTuber asked of his audience was to, if you believe in this message, then help him spread it, basically. Help him get the word out that the cause of lowering living standards year after year has to do with growing wealth inequality, where more and more wealth is being accumulated under a smaller and smaller group of ultra wealthy individuals. So I believed what he was saying, and I thought that the mechanism that he described made sense. So I decided to devote some of my free time to making these videos and editing them and hosting them. Not necessarily in the hope that I would someday be this big voice in the world of wealth inequality, but just as a little thing that I could do to maybe make the world a better place for the generations to come and for people who are already struggling right now. So I believed in the message, but there was actually something a little more personal that made me want to start doing this, which has to do with my background. So I grew up, well, I should say I was born into a middle class family. My dad was a salaried employee. My mom was able to stay at home and take care of me and take care of the house. We lived in a very nice two-story house in a nice suburb of Atlanta. And I mean, things, as far as I could tell as a kid, were pretty wonderful. That didn't last forever, though. My dad ended up passing away when I was a young child, and we lost our main source of income. My mom got jobs working as like a server in restaurants or working as a maid for like house cleaning services, and that was enough to sort of like steadily decline in living standards. And I don't want to seem ungrateful, because I understand how hard that my mom worked to provide in the situation that she was in. It's just that it wasn't enough to sustain the lifestyle that we were living at. And so we eventually lost that house, and we moved out of that nice neighborhood closer to where some extended family could help us out. And that trend basically continued until I graduated high school and got a job and was able to help contribute to the household finances. And I would describe our situation as stable poverty. So my mom worked in restaurants, and so I ate a lot of kitchen mistakes, but I was always fed. My clothes were bought secondhand, but I was always clothed. We didn't always have, money for gas. We basically never went on vacation, but I was able to get to school every day. So again, it's not a lifestyle that I would want for my kid, but I'm still grateful for it because I understand how hard that my mom worked to provide it to me. And I don't really think of it as her fault, the situation that we were in. Anyway, so I graduated high school and I ended up getting a job working at a Target, and the additional income, along with some other people that we had living with us, contributing to the household expenses, was enough to be a little bit more stable. Still not doing fantastic, but enough to keep the household afloat. What strikes me is that this situation that I'm describing when I graduated high school and got a job and was able to contribute is not relevant to people living in the same situation today, because cost of living has gotten a lot higher. Wages have not really increased at all to keep up. And so people living in the condition that I was when I graduated high school, even though I would describe that condition as poverty, are worse off than I was. And it's one of the reasons why I really, really want to do something about it. So that stable lifestyle continued for about 4 years, but then my mom passed away as well. And with her gone, there really wasn't anything keeping me in that house. And I was very fortunate to have my grandparents and my uncle basically house and send me to a 4-year school. I was going to a 2-year school while I was working at Target. I got like a Pell Grant to help support that. So thank you, government, for the Pell Grant. But that wasn't going to get me a 4-year degree in any reasonable amount of time. And so I took them up on the offer and just went to school full time. I worked really hard in university. I got really good grades. I was a good student in high school as well. I just didn't have the money to go to a 4-year school when I graduated. And so through that, I was able to make some important connections with the faculty at the university, which translated into connections in the job market in the surrounding area for software engineering, which translated into my first internship, which translated into a full-time job. And basically, I've been applying myself at each sort of level of my career, and that has allowed me to sort of escape the lifestyle of poverty that I come from. One of the things that I have to be honest with myself about is that if my extended family hadn't offered to finance my education, after my mom had died, I don't think things would have turned out this way. My Pell Grant was just running out of money. I still did not have a 2-year degree. The market for people trying to get into software engineering with a 2-year degree at the time was very competitive. And I hadn't made the same sort of connections to faculty at that 2-year school because I was also working a full-time job. A lot of my success has to do with generational wealth, which is why it's important for me to be saving and to be building wealth so that my kid has the same sort of opportunities that I did, because it's not afforded to everybody. We have to be really honest about that. The sort of 4-year education that I got without having to worry about paying bills or working is not afforded to everybody. That is a class privilege. Anyway, so that's sort of where I come from, and really the most important takeaway is that I understand that for people living in the situation of stable poverty now, things are worse than they were when I graduated high school. And there's not too much hope. I think that when people are living in that sort of desperate way, they're ready to latch on to any sort of change that shows up. They're willing to put their weight behind someone who wants to change things. And right now in the United States, the people who are running with that message are not the people who are going to enact that change, because they're very, very self-interested. I don't think that we are going to have any success changing the shape of our economy by supporting some candidate who makes us a lot of promises, and then being overjoyed when our candidate wins and then not paying attention anymore, or there's a bias that comes when you get what you want, where I think this is probably not the best metaphor, not the most approachable, but when I was in grade school, people who got a Nintendo as a gift from their parents said that Nintendo was the best. And people who got a PlayStation from their parents said that PlayStation was the best. And it really wasn't based off of any sort of fact of, what was actually the best thing. It was based on the fact of, this is the thing that I have, this is the thing that I wanted, and I got it. And so, because I have it, it has to be better than the other thing that I didn't get, right? I think that applies, unfortunately, a lot to politics. There is a bias of the candidate that I supported won. Things aren't going the way that they promised, but I have this bias to, be happy about the fact that at least I won the contest that I was trying to win. All that to say that I think if this message gets out there enough, and people really understand the way that wealth inequality is driving living standards down and down and down and down, it won't be a political issue anymore. Not in the same way that we think of political issues, where we have one group of people who are for it and one group of people who are against it, and those people are split as close to 50-50 as we can manage, right? There's no political party that's going to say, we want to lower living standards, right? We want to make things worse for working people. We want ordinary people to suffer. That is not you're not going to hear that slogan out of any candidate. But policy is bringing us that way. And unfortunately, policy is kind of bringing us that way, whether you're voting red or blue. And people get really upset when you say both sides are the same. What I will say is both sides are not the same, but both sides have overseen a decrease in living standards year over year for 40 years. So in order for us to change that, I think both sides need to understand that wealth inequality is one of the biggest economic issues that we face. And the only way that we can achieve that is if the voters of both sides understand that wealth inequality is the most pressing economic issue of our time. I hope that by making these videos, trying to make them approachable to just anyone, not really carrying any judgment against anyone if they voted one way or another, I'm hoping that this message will become more widely accepted, more popular, and then once it is, then we actually have the opportunity to do something about it. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but all of the like hardline positions that have been adopted by the major political parties in the United States tend to go back and forth, right? So one party will get in power and they'll make a lot of progress toward their goal, and then the other party will get in power and they will repeal progress toward that goal and start making progress toward their own goals. I don't think that we can make a meaningful long-term impact on growing wealth inequality without this being something that both political parties in the United States are aware of and concerned about. And that comes from like telling their voters and educating their voters. Another similarity that both sides have is a reliance on media owned by the ultra wealthy that sort of informs what they believe. When Biden was running for re-election, and then when he passed it to Kamala, they ran on the idea that the economy was fantastic, and they had a lot of metrics to support it, and people said that the vibes were off, but the vibes were off because the lives of ordinary people deteriorated in a really insane way during COVID. And the folks who were Democratic voters which, by the way, I identify myself as an independent. I don't know if it matters. Um, they thought that things were fine. They thought that things were great. They thought that things were on the way up. And then people who were living ordinary lives, working ordinary jobs, trying to support ordinary families in ordinary houses, they knew better. They knew that things were significantly worse. And all of the media that was being fed to the Democratic side was like, oh, they're complaining about the price of gas, price of eggs. They don't know what's going on. They don't understand the economy. They're stupid. They could see what was happening to them, okay? I guarantee you, having lived in that sort of environment, they know what's going on. They understand what being broke is like. And it doesn't have to do with the price of eggs. It has to do with the price of everything that drives you further and further into debt. And you can see the writing on the wall, which is, if this doesn't change, I'm going to die. My kids are going to get taken away from me because I can't provide for them anymore. So, yeah, if you're in that situation, you don't vote for the candidate that says that everything is fantastic. I feel nervous every time I bring up Republicans and Democrats because I don't want a Democrat to watch this video and think, oh my God, this guy is a right-wing lunatic. I don't want a Republican voter to watch this video and think, oh my God, this guy is a left-wing lunatic. I want to establish some common ground. I want folks to be able to recognize that living standards are going down for all American families, basically. Even middle-class families aren't able to achieve the same level of prosperity that they did during my parents' generation. So we have to come together to do something about it. And if we let ourselves be divided on all of the stuff that we don't agree on, then we won't make any meaningful progress. And that means that growing wealth inequality will get worse. And people who are suffering now will suffer more. People who aren't suffering now will begin suffering. And then we'll have a crisis on our hands. And I don't know how that crisis will shake out, but I know that it'll create a lot of unnecessary suffering for a lot of people who don't deserve it. Right, so that was kind of a downer. What can you do? Well, talk to your friends about wealth inequality. Talk to your parents about wealth inequality. Really the big eye-opener for me was understanding that the rising cost of prices and for assets and homes and other asset classes, it feels like a good thing when you own assets, but you have to realize that your chunk of assets are actually quite small compared to other asset owning groups. And so year over year you have more wealth in dollars, but you have less assets. You have less wealth and assets compared to folks who are out competing you. And understanding that stabilizing those asset prices by tackling growing wealth inequality will do at least something to address rising costs of living. And in doing so, we'll put a little bit more money in ordinary people's pockets. And then they actually get the opportunity to vote with their wallets because their wallets aren't empty. I think that'll be a really good thing for the country. So, spread that message. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and do all the things that let YouTube know that this video is worth watching. If you are living in a working class family today and your experiences are the same or different from mine, and you want to share them in a comment or share them in a video. The more people that we have talking about this, I think the better off we'll be. And we'll be able to convert this anger into awareness, and then convert the awareness into a political action that can make lives better. Thank you.